Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura, CEO of the Cultural Communications Agency, The Flash. Each episode, I bring a different business leader who's doing some game-changing work. And in this episode, I am super excited to have a great conversation with Laurel Stark, who's creative director on The Sims at EA. She is a badass on Twitter and knows what's up. It's going to be a fantastic conversation. Take a listen. Hey, Laurel.
Hey, Laura, I'm so glad we're finally getting to chat. It's long overdue.
It's so long overdue. I feel like all we do is talk over Twitter.
I know. Well, better than nothing, but this is awesome getting the face-to-face time too.
Likewise. So we're going to jump right in. So the first question for the podcast is always the same. Laurel, what was your first job?
My first non-advertising job was as a nanny. So I was watching other people's kids, which made sense because I was the oldest of four. And my first advertising job was actually, as I would say, it was an intern, but it wasn't officially called an intern, at Hal Riney in San Francisco, working on new business. Back when we had Hal Riney in San Francisco, which we don't anymore.
Awesome. Okay. So I'm sure you learned a lot there and learned how to deal with all kinds of crazy people, right?
Yep. I feel like that's what advertising is. It's a crash course, or working in creative is a crash course in dealing with different kinds of personalities.
And learning how to run away from some and be close to others.
Yes, totally.
Awesome. Okay, so you start at Hal Riney, and to now has been a obviously pretty incredible career journey. So I'd love to hear the story of how you got from there to where you are today.
Yeah, well, so I actually started, I did go to school for this, which I like to caveat that you don't need to go to school to be a creative. In fact, at least from my point of view now, sitting in the hire manager seat, is I really love to see that creativity can come from anywhere. And I think that we are doing ourselves a disservice, only hiring people that have the education and the background, because we're only hiring people that think a certain way. And also, education is expensive, and we're keeping ourselves from, really amazing, diverse talent and point of view by, kind of limiting ourselves to seeing the available talent as just folks coming out of a portfolio school or something like that. But I started, I got my MFA in advertising at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and was kind of just getting my toes, dipping my toes into my career when the economic downturn happened in 2009. So I feel like I was just getting my toes in the water, dipping my toes in the water about what it was like to be a copywriter when the economic downturn hit in 2009. And that was just super devastating everywhere, but it was especially devastating in San Francisco, which is actually a fairly relatively smaller creative market. About 2 out of every 3 creatives are out of a job. And, being relatively junior in my journey and not having the Twitter skills then, and not having LinkedIn, that was pre-LinkedIn or early on in the LinkedIn days. I just didn't have the network to pull from. So I had to be super scrappy. And anyway, I think that year really set me off to have kind of a non-traditional career and really think about things a little differently, because I had to take contract jobs. I had to network with people and really hustle and make those relationships to kind of stay afloat. And I always say that I think that year really kind of set me on the path of being more of an entrepreneurial person and being more community minded. So, I eventually, contracted a lot through that kind of rough period, made it work by the skin of my teeth. And then my career has pretty much been in and out of digital agencies in San Francisco, as well as different tech companies. I've worked for in-house teams at Google. I've worked for the brand studio. I've worked with their team that's focused on hardware. I've also run an internal team at Google focused on SMB and diversity and equity inclusion. I've also worked at the now defunct agency Inside, which was at Intel, and most recently at TikTok before taking my role at EA, which I'm actually just getting into now and really excited about. But yeah, so I've had a kind of a wild ride getting here. I've been agency side, I've been tech side. I've worked for startups. I've worked for consultancies. And I think kind of having that non-traditional background, and being, kind of in the techs, one foot in creativity, one in tech, which being in the Bay Area will give you. I think that kind of very much influenced my the diversity and inclusion work that I felt called to do, because obviously tech and creativity struggle with a lot of the same things. And I think all of that kind of led me to the place of, being at a gaming company where I'm working on a game that has the elements of supporting a creative community, and really thinking about self-expression and belonging. So yeah, I think, even if you have a very non-linear path, I think everything that you do ends up shaping where you're heading. And I like to think that if I look back now, it all sort of makes sense, even though definitely I think before.
When you're in it, you're like, not so much.
Yeah, you're just kind of going by at least for me, I didn't have like a big path in mind. I just kind of like leaned into my heart space and was like, this feels like the right next move. But yeah, I mean, I think that that's kind of in a nutshell how I got where I am, and how I kind of shaped my point of view as a creative and a leader.
So yeah, and thank you so much for sharing, because I think it's also really important for people to understand the importance of that. Like, it is not linear. There is no straight path. And I think that sometimes, especially in our creative fields, you're supposed to do this, then go portfolio school, then do this and go work this place. And then you have to stay there for X amount of time and yada, yada, yada. And, you're just awesome proof that the journey is windy and twisty, and that is 1000% okay. And it's interesting
Totally.
because, we got to know each other because you are one of the co-founders of Next Creative Leaders, which I absolutely love. And I'd love for you to tell people about that.
Yeah, actually, great timing too, because we're going to be launching our next competition in May, I believe. But yeah, Next Creative Leaders is actually a partnership with the 3% movement, which I'm a part of, and the One Club for Creativity. And it is a portfolio competition for up and coming women and non-binary creative leaders. And kind of where that kind of stemmed from in my own mind was now we're going to year 7, which is insane. I can't believe we've been doing this for 7 years. I can't believe we're global. But it all stemmed from, I know it's crazy. I feel like it's just flown by, but it stemmed from basically at the time I was an ACD working with the Google Brand Studio, and I was also managing the 3% movement social channels. And I was doing a lot of social listening and really thinking about what it meant to be a leader in the space, and how people were going about this conversation around diversity and inclusion, and how we were celebrating leadership. And what really kind of struck a nerve with me as I was seeing so much of the thing that, would make Cindy Gallup come after you. I was seeing a lot of the all white male juries, a lot of new hires that were toting, and they all look the same. It's like white men with beards and checkered shirts, or man buns, or however you want to look at that. But then I was also seeing like seeds of really beautiful thinking, and like great programming, not necessarily like gender inclusion space, but one of the things that I saw that the One Club was doing that I loved so much was they had this great educational program where they were giving these free boot camps in areas, which was essentially kind of touching on what I said earlier, and making this opportunity for folks to explore a career in creativity and build a portfolio and get feedback without having like a traditional education. And I think that's so important. But then I was also seeing that they were struggling a little bit when it came to representation on their juries, and even in their awards, like just seeing who and how they were celebrating folks. And I had this idea that what we celebrate is so important because that's what sets the tone. And I thought if we could create some sort of a platform where we're celebrating folks that look more like me or look more like my peers, then maybe we can start to change this narrative, just not just for women who are now seeing themselves and can now see themselves as leaders, but also as an industry in terms of like how we look at leadership. Because from my standpoint, what real leadership is it's not tied to a title. It's how you show up for yourself and the work and your team. And there's so many wonderful things that women bring to the table, and we just weren't celebrating them. So at that time, that was kind of my idea. I reached out like on a whim to David Jackson, who was running the socials at the One Club at the time, and just kind of said, hey, I'm going to be in New York in 2 weeks. Could we have lunch and chat? And we had a lunch. We kind of brainstormed, had this idea. And our initial competition was put together in a crazy fast 6 weeks. But it was so well received that it became regular programming, and we've continued to work on it and shape the program ever since. And a few things that we have really, decided to focus on is making it as inclusive as possible. So it's all about, if you see yourself as a leader, you don't have to have a certain title yet. So it really is open to creatives anywhere from, mid-level, like stepping into senior creative level, all the way up to like 1 year as a creative director. And it's free to enter. And there's an opportunity to really tell your story about your piece, not just like, hey, here's my work, let it speak for myself, but also like, hey, here's the work and how I showed up for the work. And really, really beautiful stories have come out of that. And I just love, seeing how the program has grown. And every year we let the winners come back and jury the next year, which kind of builds upon that, them thinking of themselves as thought leaders and the industry recognizing them as leaders. And that's just been really important, I think.
Oh, so I didn't realize that the winners end up becoming judges the next year. That's so awesome. And so
Yeah.
necessary, because it's like, how else are you going to become a judge unless you judge something? Because like that's always the thing. It's like, how do you do that? So you guys are creating an awesome
Yes.
pipeline of phenomenal judges.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I was so blown away. I was honored to be a judge last year. Well, I guess last year, yeah, last year.
Yeah. Thank
And
you so much.
the creativity was just off the charts for all the participants, and it was just beautiful to see the cornucopia of colors of women and non-binary folks, and just the work that they produced is unreal. And I think it's very important to kind of like, again, if you see it, you can do it. It's like,
I think it really is so important. And I think, we are storytellers. We're storytellers for a living, but we also tell ourselves stories, right? And we tell ourselves
exactly.
stories about who we are and what's possible for us. And I really think that in shaping programming that creates like a wider lens of what leadership can look like, we're not only including people and giving women and non-binary leaders the chance to like say, hey, I'm not waiting on my ECD to decide I'm a leader, or I'm not waiting on I don't have to wait on my PR team to decide I'm the darling that they want to push this year. Like I can decide I'm proud of this work. I'm proud of myself. I see myself as a leader, and put themselves forward. And I think even if, obviously, like you mentioned, it's a super competitive competition, and it gets more competitive every year, but it's low barrier to entry. So you can keep applying until you win. And I think also just going through the process of telling your own story through your work, through your application, is such a powerful reinforcement of how truly special you are and how much you brought to the work and to the industry as a whole. And I think that's kind of what we're thinking about. We really think about those sorts of things in building a program, because it's not just about the award, it's about the story. And I think, as a writer, like that's always been really important to me. So I love that about it. And I'm glad that you recognize that too.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal program, and I think, the more we can create opportunities where folks can see themselves, can show off their work, and realize that you don't have to wait. There isn't a perfect time. Like you do some great work, submit it. Period. Full stop. And, as someone who's, a crazy hybrid myself, where, no one remembers that I actually was a technical project manager. Like, that's
So
actually how I
awesome.
started. And folks now are like, what? It's like, yeah. Because like you never actually know. I think that's the thing, is that, like, the strength and the creativity that can come from all different types of people who are in our industry is what can make our industry so robust, if we just give people the opportunity to try something else, or to show off what they can do and get the heck out of the way. And I think that's a really awesome part about what you guys are doing, is that, like, you're just like getting the heck out of the way and letting folks go for it.
Yeah.
And that's a fantastic thing to see.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is it's really the gift that keeps on giving, because at the time there was part of it where it was like, I'm not seeing myself, and I want to be able to identify my peers and be able to be inspired by my peers and the work they're doing. Um, and I want to cheer them on, as they win at life. And as it's kind of gained steam and built, it keeps on bringing. And I've obviously, like, I'm now past the point in my career where I could even, I mean, I've never applied because I started it, but I'm now, more senior than a lot of the folks that we have winning. And it's still such a gift to me. Like, I love hearing their stories. I love interviewing them about their work. I love hearing how this honor has changed the way that they see themselves and what's possible for their careers. And I just love knowing that you can make a change just because you're the one that raises your hand because you see something. Because I'm really a nobody in the scheme of things, and I definitely was a nobody when I started this. It was just something that I wish there was, and I think that that's exactly why we need more diverse voices in the workplace, because we have the ability to see what's possible, because what's happening right now doesn't work for us. And I think if we really lean into that and the possibility of that, and what that could bring to our industry, I think we have so much potential to reinvent things in really beautiful ways that we can't even imagine just yet.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. There's so much more possibility. There's so much more talent out there. And it's going to be fantastic to see how far we can go and really change our industry. Because that's the thing. There's 10,000 more Laurels out there. There are 10,000 more Lauras out there who, when given the opportunity, can knock this out of the park.
Yeah. And I think when they listen to your podcast, they know that they can. And hopefully if they, see Next Creative Leaders or see any of the things that I started with no money and like just a wish and a prayer and some duct tape, I think that they'll see that, like, there's no magic behind making things or making an impact. It's just about really believing that it's possible and showing up for the work. The right partners and always show up. I think that the more that you can lean into yourself, the more you find the community, like on Twitter, like through Next Creative Leaders, you find the folks that are like aligned with what you're doing, and then they kind of keep your boat afloat. And I love how much that keeps being reminded to me through my experience. So awesome.
Yeah, it is. It is kind of really nice to see this sort of cool Twitter family that we've all kind of been able to build, especially over the past year. And, looking back on all the things that you've done, what do you think you'd tell 25-year-old Laurel?
Oh man, I mean, so many things. Um, I would tell little Laurel, 25-year-old Laurel, that 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 getting in touch with who she is instead of running away from who she is the fastest way to magic and peace. I think there are so many I think we can all relate to this. The 20s are so hard anyway. You're starting a career, you're trying to figure it all out. You're poor, you're usually you've got boys or girl problems, you've got student loan debt, like all of the crazy things going on. And I think we're sponges, right? And I think if you're starting out in an industry where your direct manager doesn't look like you or doesn't think like you, and where maybe you are not seeing yourself reflected or celebrated, and so it's confusing about where you fit in, I would just say breathe into that and know that like there's not just one way to be, and that if you can always just come back to your own instincts, because trying to change yourself to fit in, um or wasting energy worrying too much about what people think about you, it might keep you safe for a little while. It might, it's a lot of energy to waste though. And as a creative, or as somebody working in a creative field, like you really need all of your energy sources like freed up to work and to make change. And so I would say, and I know, and granted, I know that there's privilege here because I am white and I'm cis. So saying that with a grain of salt and acknowledgement that I have a lot more privilege than most folks. But I found that anytime I tried to, make myself more palatable to others, um, it only delayed my like unhappiness somewhere. And every time I've leaned into my authenticity and leaned into how I really feel about things and my values, it's only accelerated my career path in the direction that I need to be. It's helped kind of be a beacon for the folks that want me for me and want to work with me. And it's been just magic for the work. So that would be my advice, is like lean into you and ignore the noise around who you should be or how you should show up.
I think it's awesome and so important for folks to understand. And thinking about that, like, talk to us about a time when you had a challenge, you're like, there's no way I'm getting through this. And then you did.
Oh man. Honestly, I'll tell you one that was recent. Full transparency. I'm embarking on really a dream job after a really expansive, amazing like contract that was kind of a bridge to my dream job for me. But 2020 was really hard. It rocked me. Like I spent so much of 2020, at least the beginning of 2020, just feeling completely activated. I got laid off in late 2019, unexpectedly, but felt like a little bit of a blessing because it had been a misfit and was at a startup, and it was a chance to kind of rejigger things and figure out what I actually wanted to do that I was passionate about next. But my parents also had separated after 50 years, which was really destabilizing. And then COVID hit, and the job that I was supposed to start in March disappeared. And I just felt like everything that I had just had shaken loose on me. I didn't know who I was. I didn't have like my family support. I had a young child underfoot because her school was closed. I was struggling to figure out, my ego around my job, and then also concerned about my ability to make money moving forward, which was something that I've really not thought about. Like I've been so lucky and blessed in my career since the very beginning. It was a very bad feeling, and I felt really lost, and I felt really rejected, and I was really unsure of, I just felt like I remember every now and then I would like have like a really vulnerable moment with a friend and say like, maybe this is it for me. Like maybe I'm actually really not good at this and I'm never going to get another job. And that just felt really bad and lonely. And so instead of sitting in my loneliness because it was terrible, and sitting in my self-doubt, I really felt like I need to be of service in the moment, because if I'm of service, then I'm feeling like even if I can't help myself, I can help somebody else, or I can be brave and maybe inspire somebody else. And I didn't know how to help myself. So I thought if I focused on, helping someone else, that would be the way to go. And I just started listening to my heart and people that were inspiring me. And since, my mental health was getting really loud during COVID, and I had connected with Victoria Rosselli, also an amazing creative who's now with the New York Times tea brand. And she had written an article about her struggles with mental health while working in advertising. And I reached out to her and said, I really align with how you're thinking. I have some free time. Would you maybe want to work on a project with me about mental health. And so we decided to be part of the solution, and we started our silent partner, which was a crowdsourced reflection on mental health. And the idea was that, we really wished agency leaders were talking about how much folks were struggling right now, because we knew we were struggling and we knew our friends were struggling, and we were concerned about the silence and wanted to get people talking. And since, in the ad world, the one thing that we don't shut up about is the work. We thought, hey, if we turn our mental health into work, maybe we can get people talking. And it was so funny because it was very scary for me to say, like, while unemployed, I have a history of struggling with mental health issues. Like, I have struggled with depression. I've struggled with an eating disorder. I've struggled with anxiety. It was very scary for me because I thought, like, that's not going to help my hireability. Like my little inner voice was like, this is not going to help you.
Right.
But my out voice was like, I have to be the one to start this conversation, because if I'm waiting, no one's ever going to do it. And
your vulnerability is the key.
Vulnerability is the key, and doing things that are scary. But like launching that, actually, and one, I got this amazing partnership with Victoria, which helped, give me some purpose, and it helped me feel less alone during a crazy time. And then all of a sudden, like, I had community around this conversation, and also it mattered to people, and people, we were getting press, and and I'm not saying like to do these things for press, like that's not the point, but I will say, like, leaning into a solution where your heart's really invested, where it feels super authentic and vulnerable for you to show up, like, that shapes your story in a really powerful way. And it also gave me something relevant. It created new work for my book. It created new opportunities to connect with people and things to share on LinkedIn. And I think just remembering that I could be of service and that my creativity could help make things better for others really helped lift me out of that like doom and gloom mentality. And it's helped kind of bolster me since. And I think that was kind of the way that I navigated. That was really just about, being like leaning into being scared, and also like believing that the conversation or the solution has to come from somewhere. Why not you? And I think that that's always a good way to go when you're feeling, doubtful about yourself or your future. Just create, be of service.
Awesome. And such an incredible message. And thank you so much for sharing that. Because I think it'll help a lot of people. Because I think, the more we're able to be honest and vulnerable about some of these things, the more we can actually affect real change. Because
Totally.
we know the industry that we're in, and it's, having that vulnerability is so hard and so scary. But it does help so many. You never know how many people you're helping just by speaking your truth. And so thank you for that.
It's so true. I think you do, and you help yourself. Like, I think that that's like the thing too, is like it's never just
Totally.
about like being in service. Because if you are in service, you have purpose. And then by like lifting the tide, like you're lifting your boat too. And I think that that's so true about any sort of change that happens over time. Like, we have to be invested in the collective outcome being good. And so even if you are not in the industry yet, or even if you are in the industry and you're junior, like, know that you can still be a part of shaping an industry that's worthy of your time, like, or a world that's worthy of your time and your love and your passion. Like, that's exactly when we need you. We need you all the time, but you don't have to wait on that. You don't have to wait for somebody else to give you permission to be a part of the solution.
Exactly. And so remarkably true. And thinking about that, the thing is, like, it's still heavy to do all this work.
Yeah.
And obviously you're navigating, working, and you've got a little one. What do you do for Laurel? What's your self-care routine?
Full transparency, this is still very much like a work in progress for me. Like, and as a doer, like, I'm very Aries, so I'm very like starter energy and love like working on too many side projects and all of that. Like, don't know what good sleep is. Like, that was definitely me pre-pandemic. I'm trying to work on that. For me, a big part of my self-care is around therapy and investing in the resources, which, luckily I was in a different financial situation, even just 6 months ago than I am now. But really doing the work. And I've invested in a program so that I'm focused on doing a lot of like inner child and shadow work, which has been, I think, pivotal to me, embracing some of these shadow aspects of myself and really leaning into how that makes me special and how that makes me the perfect person to speak up in the moment. And that's been a big part of my self-care. And then some people know this about me. Like, I am a compulsive bath taker. I love a bath. And I actually use baths to do my meditation. So I do a guided meditation, I turn off the lights in the bath, light a candle, and do the full, like, I have a little bath bar. I put my bath together with whatever I want to do, whether it's detox or skin or whatever. I put all the essential oils in there, and then I drop into a guided meditation. And I spend, 20 to 30 minutes in the tub. And I try to do that like 4 to 5 times a week.
Awesome.
Yeah.
More baths are so very important.
It's so weird because I'm like, I'm almost 40 and I spend more time in the bathtub than my 5-year-old, but for me, the water is healing, and I get the double whammy of like, for me, it helps me drop into my meditation, which otherwise I have a hard time doing. So
Makes sense. No, I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great use of it. So last question for you.
yeah.
Do you have a give and or ask of the audience?
Oh yeah, man. I was just talking about this with Kiana, and we were talking about how powerful it is when we focus on healing ourselves and healing our wounds and honoring our own journeys, because one, like it helps the collective, right? But also because it means that we're not pushing that onto other people, even like not on purpose, just, having our bad experiences influence the way we show up with other folks. So my biggest ask is that, to everyone who's listening, like, that you carve out some time to take care of yourself and work on your own healing, because there's nothing is worth your time more than investing in yourself. And also by doing that, like, I really want to challenge the notion of like self-care being selfish. It's really not. It's like
Nope.
it's the least selfish thing you could do, because you are part of a collective, whether you want to be or not. And I think especially in this moment when so many of us are triggered, and this is a stressful time in the world. It's a stressful time to be women in the world. It's a stressful time to be othered in this world. And just acknowledging our intersectionality, wherever that means for you, whether you're a part of the LGBTQ or you're Black or brown or you're otherwise feeling, triggered in this moment. I think just remembering that you get to come first. And even if it's hard and scary, just like take like 5 minutes to acknowledge what you've been through and work on that. And just know that investing in your own healing is so important. So my ask would be that invest in your own healing in whatever way that feels authentic to you.
That's beautiful, Laurel. Thank you so much. And
Yeah,
you're so right. It's like, it's the oxygen mask on you first before anybody else. And so
totally.
as much as you can do for yourself, then you can give so many gifts out to the world when you're feeling in a good spot. So that's a wonderful message and absolutely wonderful. And of course, I knew this would be a great conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me. It was lovely chatting.
Awesome. And so we'll put information about Next Creative Leaders and how you can reach and follow Laurel on Twitter. She's hilarious and knows what she speaks above. It's a great conversation. She has, and she always has. But thank you so much for being us on this show.
Thank you
And
so much for inviting me. This was really, really lovely.
awesome. And that is our show.